I don't know, man. It's funny because, like, I guess we've never really sat down and talked like this, but I feel like we've been talking online for so long. I feel like I've kind of known you throughout a lot of what has been the journey so far.
Yeah, you were one of the first, like, notable DJ producers, like figureheads in the industry that like sort of reached out to me when I first was starting this project. So, you've definitely been tuned in since like the beginning,
Wow, I was stoked, man. I don't remember how. I'm trying to remember how I found out that you were doing it. Maybe you and I were just talking at the time and you slid me some tunes or something. But I just remember the first couple songs you sent me, I got so stoked for it. And then to see where you've taken it since then, man, it's been really cool because it seems like you're really kind of on your path to building this whole world for yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, it's, the whole journey has been a, crazy, I wouldn't say like ups and downs because it hasn't been like fluctuated that much, but it's been a really cool journey that's very specific to me. That's kind of at the end of the day, what I just try to like aim for is to just make sure that like I'm really in tune with like what I'm into and not like making music for somebody else's standards or whatever,
right. Yeah, man, that's the key. And I think, I we'll talk about the whole thing, but, you had a project before this too. And and I think it can be so easy, especially when you're first starting off and especially when you first get a little success or you get to play some shows or release with a cool label to kind of just get in the mindset of like, well, I'm just going to do whatever I got to do to make this keep happening rather than like, I'm going to make shit that I think is the coolest music,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that was a huge thing for me. I mean, to like kind of touch on what you were saying, like I had a project called Tassione, which is my last name. And, I just had started that like when I first started making music seriously, which is probably like in 2012, 2013. And I just was like, oh, let me make a SoundCloud account. I'll put it as my last name. And then, I kind of just kept putting out music and it got to a point where it just the name kind of just stuck. So, I was making like trap music, bass music, was really inspired by, that fucking classic like trap era, like Flostradamus, like, like that
first
era.
Wave, man. Yeah.
Yeah. That wave. Oh my God. Like that is what got me so excited about making music. And then, from there, I think when my name started to get maybe a little bit more like notable was like around that like hybrid trap era, the sound design era, like Serum and, like,
yeah. It's funny, man, because it's funny you say that because you're totally right that I've never really made that connection, but I think you're right. It's when Serum kind of came onto the scene that a lot of things started changing. And Serum, for anybody listening who doesn't know, Serum is a synthesizer that became extremely popular, is still extremely popular. Kind of like mid 2010s? When did Serum come out?
I think it had to be like around 2015.
Yeah.
Because I very distinctly remember, I was working at a mortgage company at the time and like making like trap flips and whatnot in like the parking lot on lunch breaks. And then I had gotten the job.
Flipping houses and flipping tracks.
I was literally just like an entry level mortgage person, like out of college, like just a bullshit job that like I needed to like get money. And then I got a job when Cymatics first started. I was like one of the first sound designers. So that allowed me to like work on music and get paid for it from them, like for, 60 hours a week or whatever.
Right. And so they, again, just for people who might not know, Cymatics was like the sample pack company before everybody was a sample pack company, It was, there's been companies, but they were, I think what really separated Cymatics from the rest of the pack was at the time they were putting out project files where you could, and Serum presets, and that really like aligned with like Serum's coming out. So then it was like this hybrid trap
going into dubstep era of Serum and Project,
Right.
like it all sort of combined into this thing to where Cymatics like really like was marketing heavy on the internet, all that stuff. But that was essentially
their marketing was crazy too.
Yeah. That was the opportunity that I had, and I took it because I was like, working at a mortgage company or like sound designing for a living 60 hours a week.
Right.
And so I got really good at Serum and sound designing. And then I was, making trap and whatnot. And then it sort of started getting into like rhythm and dubstep. And I had never liked dubstep. So I was like, it just felt, I don't know, everything kind of felt lifeless and soulless to me at that time. So that's when I decided, I was like, I almost quit music straight up.
Right.
Because because I was a little younger, and I just thought I was like, well, this was it. Like I didn't do it,
Yep.
And so I almost quit because I just wasn't inspired. Then I started kind of going, at the time I was getting into Eurorack stuff. So I'm going back and looking up like old Eurorack stuff. And I come across this video like Acid House 1958. I'm like, oh, well, there's no way. So let me click on it. And then down a rabbit hole, landed on like some early 90s stuff. And it just like, it just hit me in a way where I'm like, oh, this is exciting and cool. Like I am into this,
Yeah.
The hardware, I could go on forever, but like, like like that 90s, that early 90s rave stuff going into early 2000s, that is just, man, that's what gets me going.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. I mean, for me, like I got into going to raves in the late 90s, and I mean, you can't even compare then and now. It's like two totally different things. But back then, I mean, it really was, I just got addicted to it, man. Like and especially, I didn't know how they were making the music at the time, but now that I know, and going back there, you can point to like specific pieces of hardware that made like all of my favorite songs from that era. And it's kind of mind blowing when you realize like what limited tools people were using to make this music that meant so much to me at the time.
Yeah, that's how I felt, because I was getting into hardware, and then it was almost this little perfect storm where, I was born in 93. So I wasn't, listening to like mixes in 93 and,
right.
But, growing up, and there's the beginning of like the real like video game like era where like everybody's got a PS2. Then there's Dance Dance Revolution, all this other stuff. I remember going to roller rinks for kids' birthdays and hearing those kind of songs, and it was just that nostalgia that sort of hit me. And I was like, wow, like this is just so interesting. And the thing about the hardware too is it's so exciting thinking about the history of the hardware and like what it was built to do, and then what it ended up becoming.
Yeah.
And how that's still relevant 30 years later, like very extremely relevant 30 years later, and even more with some of the Roland gear coming out earlier than that. And I just love how in like techno and rave music, everybody's using the same sounds. So there's no like barrier to entry on it. It's like everybody's got vengeance kicks and rave stabs and whatnot. And then it really comes down to like you making the best idea with those tools. And I thought that sort of limitation is like a really cool challenge. And I enjoy hearing what other people do with it. And it also creates a lot of context within the music that I enjoy.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a really cool way to think about it, because I think the flip side of that is maybe what you got disenchanted with, which is people, like sound design wars and everyone trying to just make like the newest, craziest, most overdriven sound, whatever it is, which is, that's totally valid. That's one way to create. But I think the problem that happens a lot of the time that I think anyone who produces this kind of music can see after a while is that a lot of times it's really just about that competition of making the sounds, and it becomes much less about the actual idea or the spirit of the song or the arrangement or whatever it is that And to me, what I'm hearing you say is that, yeah, if you flip it around and be like, no, let's think about the song and not worry about the tools so much, that, that's a really interesting area to mine.
Yeah. And it's like, you listen to the mixes of I'll hear like a techno tune that comes out, this year. And you're like, did this come out in 2022 or 2002?
Right.
And I personally love that, and it was such a great escape for me, because I was one that was like sound design, like mix downs, like, and then like you said, like I just got really uninspired by that workflow. Cause you peel back a layer and you're like, to me, it just felt like there was nothing else there.
Yeah.
Where I think in the first like cycle, the rise and fall of a genre that I really experienced was like trap music. Cause I was getting into it when it was like Dylan Francis remixes and,
right.
Flostradamus, like that stuff. And you're like, wow, this is so like closely rooted to like hip hop and like, the 140 trap beats that were like, Waka Flocka stuff and whatnot. And then it just gets turned to this thing that's just not even recognized. Like there are no roots left.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, this is so forward thinking and inventive. But I think what I'm realizing now is I enjoy stuff that is like, has those heavy roots. The music I'm making is like, I'm not doing anything different than some guy was doing in like the early 90s. And I love that. And I think that's cool. Like, that's the kind of stuff I'm into.
Are you still mostly hardware based when you're writing music?
No. And I've never been mostly hardware based. I had a lot of hardware. And I think what I took away from that was it got me out of the workflow of open serum, FM from B, like do I was in such a rigid routine. And I was producing with sort of the same techniques I'd always been producing, but by getting Eurorack and different drum machines, it got me out of that loop that I always used to be in. And I picked up a lot of really good, like just workflow strategies, techniques, whatever you want to call it, where now I'm implementing that into Ableton and coming up with really, really cool and fun ways to like use Ableton, which we can get into later. I'm actually building a sequencer with an artist, Sabroy, that is like tailor made to like everything that I've used in Eurorack sequencers and like the 303 sequencer. So
that's exciting, man. That's really fun. Yeah. I mean, it's because I wanted to say that about your music too. Like even the music you're making, right now, the last few releases and all that, is I think one of the many reasons why it works so well is that at least from a producer nerd standpoint, like I can tell that you're able to like apply the sort of, overclocked like mixing and mastering techniques from say, heavier music and apply them to the techno that you're making now. And I think it makes this really interesting thing that just sound like it hits so hard. The impact is so like they're all big sounding songs without being, super aggressive in the way that, dubstep or some of the trap stuff is. And I think to me, I don't know if you attribute that to anything, but I wonder if that's sort of your background making more aggressive music in the engineering sense.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you acquire all these tools and techniques from the time you start. And the first like 6 or so years that I started producing, I was trying to, get anything in between like Ricky Remedy and Hero Bus. Like those were the two where I'm like, if I can land, obviously like two of the best. And I'm like, if I can land somewhere around there, like I'll be happy. So you start to pick up things from there, like sound design stuff, processing stuff. And then the hardest jump was I knew what I wanted to make when I first started the HELLBOUND project. And I can't honestly say that I'm even there yet. I mean, of course, that's like everybody's never satisfied, but a lot of the early releases of Hellbound stuff was me trying to like navigate that path from like trap music to like hard techno, which is like what I'm really, really making right now. Like also like with the NULLSECT stuff and the label that me and my buddies have started, like there's just been like a really long journey. And I know a lot of people, I had a lot of success on those really early releases. And I'll have sometimes where I'm like, damn, like I can never just like stay and just like know that I'm succeeding. But I'm finally at a point where I'm really writing the music that I'm inspired by. Yeah. And, for those who maybe don't know, I mean, I don't know if I think you probably know, like me and my buddy Revel and my manager Anthony, like we started a label called NULLSECT because we were just like, okay, we want to make what we want to make. And, there's no labels out there in like America that are going to put this stuff out.
Right.
Because we're really aiming for like, the stuff that's being released in Europe on like all these awesome techno collectives. And you just go to send that around to, if you're like, oh, what label could we send it to? And you're like, that wouldn't work. Nope. They wouldn't take, nope, no shot. Right. Like, so yeah, I forget where I was even going with that.
No, it's all good, man. I mean, I think that's smart to kind of build your own little family and your own little home base for whatever you're doing. I don't know. I think it's so easy to get caught up chasing the cosign or chasing the big name or any of that. When at the end of the day, even if you end up getting the cosign or the big label or whatever, it's not necessary, it's not any kind of like golden key that unlocks some door for you that you couldn't open yourself.
Oh, exactly. I think that I used to have a lot of pressure to do that. And I used to create a lot of pressure to do that, when I was making trap music or even like earlier in the Hellbound journey when the stuff I was making was ravey, but it was kind of like bass housey at the same time with some certain techno elements. But, there was that pressure because that's the blueprint, that everybody feels like they need to follow. Like, let's say you're starting to make music right now and you're a tech house producer. You're like, if I could get on a John Summit tour, I would just have it made. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which, like that would be fire. Like, but when you don't have any of that, like I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, if I could get on like this techno artist tour, because I'm like, they're not even here yet,
Yeah.
Maybe the day that Charlotte DeWitt or Amelie Lenz decides to, announce a 50 stop or 40 stop tour in America, then I can be like, okay, like how do I do that? But right now I'm just like making music for me and my friends and like, putting it out and just saying, fuck it.
That's the way it should be, man. Have you have you gotten any reaction from European techno people? Like, is there any kind of awareness of what you're doing? Because I'd be really curious how some of the bigger Euro people would react to your version of it. I don't even know what to call it.
I'll have to send you some music as well. Like a lot of the stuff that I've been making over the past couple of years is like still not out just because we ran into that thing where I'm like, okay, like let's say my label was not a thing, and I make a 145 BPM, like hard techno tune that is just like ready for the warehouse and nothing else, like not going to stream on Spotify because nobody's, you know what I'm saying? It's not like one of those. You basically like it being in my position, you have the option of let's send like a Hail Mary demo to like some labels. Hopefully they pick it up. They probably are not. Let's be real. Or you self-release. And then that's when we came up with the idea, me and Revel and, my manager and other guys, part of NULLSECT, to like try to create something to where we can self-release and put out whatever we want. Also put out our friends' music. And then it sort of being contributed to something. But to answer your original question, I've gotten some feedback from a few people over in Europe. Like I've sent stuff to Charlotte DeWitt, Amelie Lenz. It's so funny. I sent her this whole playlist of stuff and it was like 90% of the playlist was like stuff that I'd really like grinded and worked hard on in Ableton.
Yeah.
Then there's 2 songs in there that I made on the program VCV Rack. The entire song, start to finish, I made on VCV Rack. And I was sequencing it and like literally like jamming it out, recording it to Ableton as a single wave file.
Right.
And,
So,
and
yeah,
I'm like, this is just a fun
song,
experiment. And she emails back and she's like, oh, I love that one. That one's so cool. I'm going to play it in my mix. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I almost didn't even send you that.
That's the way it always goes, man. It's so funny.
Know.
But I feel like that's a really good indication though, to follow more of that. Cause I feel like what you were talking about, doing kind of, you know, more sort of in the flow, less in your head, more like more heart, less head kind of writing. Yeah. Seems like if that's the one she picked out, I don't know. That's to me an indication to just keep going on that track. It is.
But you definitely know it is really hard to shut that off.
Oh, it's impossible. Yeah.
It's impossible. Like, that's why I have to like, sometimes I write better music on planes because there's no, I'm not in the middle seat on an American Airlines flight going, I'm going to write the best song of my life. Right. I'm just like, let's just blah, 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 throw some shit on. I barely can hear it in my headphones. And then I like come away with it. I'm like, this is awesome. Like,
yeah,
why can't I do this? You know? So I have to like trick myself. I have to trick myself to like open up a new plugin, try to learn it. And then it's like, before I know it, I have enough sounds for a song. And I'm like, oh, that was fun. You know?
Yeah. Tricking yourself, man. I'm a big fan of that in general. Cause I think, and especially for you, I mean, you started off, you know, we were talking about working for Cymatics and all of that. I mean, you had to get really good in the kind of academic sense of knowing all the ins and outs of the software and the precise mixing techniques. It's hard to unlearn that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that has been probably what's made this so enjoyable for me, though, is that it is like a complete 180, like rebellion from like everything that I like practiced and believed in before.
Yeah.
To where now I'm like, I literally, it's so funny. The other day I'm listening to a screen recording on Twitter of this like really underground, like techno producer that I follow. And I'm like, this sounds sick. This sounds so dope. And I realized that the Twitter compression was like still on. So it was still hella clipped.
Right.
And it turned off and it like played the clean audio. And I'm like, oh, damn. I was like, I liked it better before. Where now I'm
when
like,
it was all messed up.
I'm like, how can we make it sound terrible? You know?
Like, right. Like a highly technical way to just make it sound bad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I love.
No, that's really cool, man. I think that's like, I don't know, going back and kind of getting back to the roots of it. Like that's, you know, because back in the day, like what you were talking about earlier, the rave music from the 90s and all that, none of that was super clean or super hi-fi. And yet it's like, that's where everything we do now came from, you know?
Yeah. There's like songs like early 90s, like techno, whatever, house, jungle, just dance music songs where you'll listen to the same loop and then the song will entirely change in the middle. Like key sounds where you're listening to it now, you're like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But I imagine in that time, they were just so psyched to be able to like have something different that it worked and it blew people's minds. And I'm like, that is so sick.
Yeah. Oh man, the arrangements in like 90s rave songs, you're right. They're so wild.
They're insane.
Especially
they're all over
some
the
of the old like breakbeat hardcore kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What would end up being drum and what we know now as drum and bass and hard style and all that kind of came out of this, like, well, not all of it. I shouldn't generalize, but the breakbeat hardcore stuff from the early 90s was like such a blueprint for so many things we have now. And you listen to some of that and it's like 6 songs in one, you know?
Yeah. And it's awesome. Like, do you know I don't know if it's one person, however many people, but Manix, Manix.
Yeah. I don't know anything about them, but I know who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen to Manix. Like there's a few songs. And it's very like, it's like 140 kind of techno, but just like break beats to the whole thing. It's so sick. But in those songs, it's like piano riff in one key, like resampled vocal, and then just hard switches to like different key, different sound. And I'm like, that was so bad, but I love it. So like, it was so great at the same time. And I'm like, why can't I just like turn my brain off and like do stuff like that? You know?
Right. Well, it's always a struggle, man. It's interesting. And I'll be curious to hear some of your new tunes too. But because the thing is, you want to make sure that you're making music that people can comprehend on a certain level. But you also want to make sure that you're making, something that really reflects you and your perspective. And it's a really fine line to walk.
It is. And it's really tough. Like, especially once you start really thinking about it, it's like, you're already like venturing into like the wrong headspace,
Yeah.
I have the belief where it's like, I try to, at least for me, just turn my brain off, write something start to finish, not care about any of those things. Like, will somebody listen? And then if it's something that is like probably not great for a release, it's like, okay, like just leave it there, go start another one. Cause you'll hit lightning in a bottle one of those times and you'll have that song that was just so effortless. So it just flows so well and it just captures something different.
Yeah, you're right, man. And I think that's the way to make it fun for yourself the whole way through too, is to just always write whatever's fun at the time. And then, check, like go back to it later, but don't worry about it in the moment.
No, not everything is going to be, your lead single on your EP that comes out on like the most fire label that has you on tour with that. You know what I'm saying? And if you go into every session trying to do that, you're just sort of, putting the blinders on to like all these other fun possibilities that just like may work amazingly.
That's the thing. No, you can never predict what your hit song is going to be. I talk about that all the time. The same way with you and Amelie Lenz, where she picks out kind of the random song at the end, where, if you had been trying to just make music that she's going to love, it's like that song wouldn't have even been on there. Yeah, it's one of those weird things, man. I mean, how did you... Like, I've always thought of you as like a highly technical, highly capable producer. How did you get into making electronic music in the first place?
Oh, that's a good question. So I always grew up a musician. I probably started like playing the piano and like being around instruments from the time I was 2. My grandmother on my dad's side was really musical and she had a piano and I'd always play that. Her dad actually was like in the pit for a lot of like TV shows in the early 1900s. Wow. So they were living up in New York, I guess probably the 1930s, 40s ish. And, like, I can't name these specific shows, but I know he like played like in the Looney Tunes theme song, like he played flute.
Oh, wow.
Played flute with Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett. Damn. So he was like big time with that. So that was my blood relative. And then my dad's not musical at all, but my uncle, his brother, was very musical. So was my aunt. My aunt was like in plays and stuff, so very artistic. Then on my mom's side, my aunt married, like his name's John. Probably the best musician I've ever seen in person in my life.
Okay.
The guy played with Elton John, Eric Clapton, Tina Turner, Van Morrison. He was in Squeeze. He was from England, and they had just met and they got married, traveled the world, had this crazy life. So they actually lived in my neighborhood, and he had like a $200,000 studio in his basement.
Oh man. So you could kind of go over there as a kid and at least check out what a pro setup looks like.
Yeah. And he would teach me guitar. So I was playing guitar, was in bands growing up. And then I kind of fell out of that and really focused on like skateboarding. And I grew up playing ice hockey. And I was doing film for a while because, I really liked skating with my friends, filming, uploading the footage, editing videos. I loved editing skate videos. And then I got into rap music and I'm like, how do they make the beats? And then somebody shows me how they make the beats and I'm like, oh my God, this is like the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like editing video and editing and like making a song. It's like the programs look the same. It's the same idea. Like the workflow is very similar. So I picked up on that very easily because of my previous knowledge being a musician. And then also like the years I was doing video stuff. And that's actually what I went to college for.
Okay.
And I just got I went to a really good high school for video stuff. And when I went to college, we were like starting from scratch, like a couple years in. Once I could finally take my like, you know, the classes that actually applied to my major, it was like, all right, this is the lens. This is how you attach and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
You know, I was like doing After Effects when I was 16. Like, I don't need this right now. So that's when I started making music. And then it has just been, that is exactly, I was like, this is perfect. This is what I want to do.
Man. And so what did you start off on? What was your first like DAW, your first setup?
So the first setup was, I was using Reason because my high school had a music tech class. And that was like the first time I had ever like produced music was in that class.
Oh, wow.
And they were using Reason. So I would make stuff in class, email the project file home where I had a cracked version of Reason. Cause I'm like 17. I'm just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I was using Reason for a while, but really like not seriously. I wasn't serious with it. It was just like a fun thing I did. Cause you know, I went to high school when like, you know, Mac Miller and Sam, like that era. So like every white kid in my high school was like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm good. I'm not going to rap.
Yeah.
I'll make the beats, you know? So I'm glad I went that route because it's just so funny. But
yeah, man. I mean, there's so many DJs who I think had a rapper phase when they were a kid.
Oh my God. That era is so funny. Like 2010, I'm in high school. It's like Asher Roth, Mac Miller, Chris Webby, like that vibe. And I'm like, that was such an era. Like it was so unbelievable.
Yeah, it was, man. It was like they were just killing the college circuit for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, everything was about college and drinking and like all the songs were coming out on the blogs.
Yeah, it really was, man. It was
so funny. But yeah, I decided I wanted to make the beats instead. I was like, this is way better for me.
You know, Asher Roth has a big like warehouse in Philly that's kind of like an artist compound.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if do you know Swizzy Mac?
I don't know him personally, but I've ran into him a few times.
Yeah, I should link you two up because Swizzy's out in Philly too. And when I had Swizzy on this podcast, we recorded it at Asher Roth's little compound. I think in North Philly, I forget where. Oh,
that's it. Yeah, I live in North Philly, so that could be cool.
Nice, man.
Honestly, it could be like right around me for all I know.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, man. I don't know Philly too good, but it was just funny because I was like, man, Asher Roth, and I guess he's just been chilling in Philly, like kind of building a little artist collective. He wasn't there at the time, but it's just funny because we were talking about that movement, and I always wonder like what happens to people after like their movement is kind of past, you know?
It was such a like a hot era for that, you know?
Oh man, crazy. I mean, yeah, he was like the biggest for like a year there. He could play anywhere.
Yeah, those guys like Sammy Adams too, like he was, you know, same vibe, like just absolutely killed that time. It's crazy.
Yep.
But yeah, like I was making music like in high school on Reason, had gone to college, and I was really like bought into like playing hockey at college and doing the film stuff. And then probably around my junior year, I was just like, I was so sick of it. And then my one buddy, this artist, Tie-Dye Kai, super sick. I've actually known him since I was 5. We were next door neighbors. And he started getting into DJing and going to shows and making music. And he was like, bro, you should do it. Like you'll like, it'll be easy for you. So I downloaded Logic. And then like literally like, I feel like it was within months. Like I was already making like pretty damn good music. Cause like, I just understood how those programs worked, whether it's After Effects, whether it's video, audio, whatever, like the programs all work the same way. And then having the musical knowledge that I had, like, I felt like I picked it up like really fast.
Yeah. You also strike me as the kind of person who, if you're latched on to something, like I'm imagining you just sitting in front of Logic for like 8 hours a day.
I was, 20 and I'm in my college house with like 5 of my other friends. And like me and my friends would literally get in fights because he'd be like, yo, we're going to like play Xbox and like smoke. And I'm like, I'm good. Like, I'm like working on this thing. They'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing, dude? Like, what do you think you're going to do? Like and I'm like, I'm just having fun, man. Like, chill.
That's really funny, man. I mean, at that time, did you have any thoughts that maybe this could turn into something?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in myself, and I always try to have, I try not to like come up with reasons why something won't work before it even happens. Like, cause why? You know what I'm saying? Like, you just kind of limit yourself. Even like a lot of failed opportunities that I've had, I've learned such valuable lessons from it.
Oh, yeah.
To where you're like, okay, I failed. I invested like 5 years into this, but like, if I didn't do that and I just kind of played it safe, like I wouldn't have learned anything. I would have been right in the same spot I was, just like playing it safe, like following somebody else's blueprint.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you kind of like, you don't have those moments where you like really mess up and you need to like understand why and like how to not do that again,
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's completely right. The only way I've learned anything important in my entire life is by messing it up the first time. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Like you can be taught plenty, but it's not until you try it yourself and see, how you're doing it wrong that at least for me, that's the only way it sticks. But I think another important thing in what you're saying too is you also there's a certain self-awareness that, like I'm thinking about now, you sort of laying down the Tassion project and starting the HELLBOUND project. It's like at a certain point, you also have to have enough awareness of yourself to be like, well, this isn't working, so let's try something else, which is a hard thing to do when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. For me, I was in a unique situation because, I've talked to a lot of people that are like, damn, I wish I could do the same thing. But like, I'm touring off this project and like, this is how I make my income. Like I wasn't making money from playing shows as Tassion. Like I just was making money from like sound designing, doing work, mixing, mastering stuff, like all the back end stuff. And so I just was like, all right, well, like I'm still going to do that and I'm going to be able to eat. Like, let me try something totally different and see if it works. And this time I'm going to like make sure that I'm only doing stuff that I love. Because towards the end of that Tassion project, it was like, I really wasn't making like, and like, of course it sounded like me. Like I had a sound because like I was the one making it every time. Like that's just going to happen regardless, But I felt like the things I was chasing was like not really aligned with like what I thought was cool anymore. And I just found myself being like, I don't want to do that. Like, why am I even like, like it's not a knock against any of it. Right. But when you fall out of love with it, like you just need to realize it and like go find something you love, Yep.
And
that's what happened to me.
That's the thing, man. Cause the other side of that, say you hadn't, started over with HELLBOUND, it's, who knows, maybe Tassion could become a huge project, but even if it was, it wouldn't be fulfilling,
I'd be miserable.
Right.
If I had to like jump on stage to like, I don't want to sound like I'm bad mouthing or trashing.
Yeah, we're definitely not doing that.
It's just the honest way I felt was I was like, I hate this.
Yeah.
It just, I didn't feel any sort of connection to it anymore. And I didn't feel connected to anything really until I stumbled across like the 90s dance music and the techno stuff. And I was like, wow, like this is crazy. And then it even got taken one step further. So another like huge sort of pivotal moment was right when the pandemic started, because I had gotten asked by Hayden like Kazo and his team to jump on his tour. And then I was going to go on Yultron's tour, and all the music I was making that sort of put me in the position to go on those tours was more of like a bass housey with rave elements, thrown in. And I was really psyched. It was going to be huge. It was like within the first year of me launching the project, debuted at Space Yacht, then going on the Yultron tour, then going on the like it was like lined up to be like on paper, just looking perfect. And then, of course, the first show I'm about to play is March 13th in San Jose. And I'm like, looking back on it now, I'm just sitting there with my suitcase all packed. And I'm like, all right, here we go. And then they're like, we have to cancel the show. I'm like, I'll just catch the next one. And then it's like 2 years later, here we are,
Oh, man. But do you think that enforced time off or sort of delay to it, do you think that helped you kind of, visualize and like crystallize what you wanted the project to be a little more?
Yeah. And it definitely did help me get to a place where I felt I was really expressing myself and not creating like this cool rave bass house kind of thing.
Right. Because
during that time, I had known, I was like, my music still isn't like where I really want it to be. Like, it doesn't have this like edge that I'm looking for. It sounds very like EDM-ish. And like, I was like, I'm not going and doing that again. Like I'm done. So during that time, it was like, I was living at home at the time, and it's the beginning of the pandemic. There's nothing to do. There's no like infrastructure for like social distancing and seeing people and outdoor dining. So I'm literally driving for fun. I am just driving through the woods, like the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and just getting back there and smoking and listening to music.
Yeah.
And I was talking to my buddy Revel, who, for those who don't know, Revel is like the godfather of rave stuff for me. He's like younger than me, but he is like, if you were to just have a conversation with him, you would think he was like 50. Like he lived through it all.
It's true, man.
It's unbelievable.
And his music too is super uncompromising as far as like that old rave sound.
He is the most inspiring person I've come across in this whole thing. So I'm back in the woods and I'm like, hey, need some cool music to listen to. Send me something. He sends me, I don't know if you know the artist Clouds. They make really like raw and organic. And when I say organic, it just sounds like a bunch of Foley, like really cool Foley processed, and just make some sick techno. So he sent me this album, and I'm like, okay, let's put this on and go for a drive. I'm driving through the Pine Barrens and this is like my first drive back there, where you don't have any cell service.
Okay.
You're driving down dirt roads. I'd never been there. And I'm like, let's just keep driving until like, whatever. So I'm a little on edge because like I have no cell service. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I'm going. There's dirt roads. I'm in a Honda Civic. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like trying to make the most of the situation. And I put this on, and it is the most unsettling music. And I am like, I'm starting to get anxiety. I'm like in my head, I'm like, whoa. I'm like looking around the woods through the trees, and I'm like, wouldn't it be sick? Like if I looked that way, I look back, I turn back and there's like a nun there, or like some like, you know what I'm saying?
You're writing your own little horror film. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm in my head now, and I am like, I have like adrenaline. So I get out of the car, still playing the music, and I go down this path. And it is so quiet back there. I mean, there's nobody back there. Nobody. And so I'm like taking an Instagram story where I'm like doing this, and I'm like looking hard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I see in the camera bones. And I'm like, I turn around. I'm in the center of like, there's like 3 full deer carcasses around me, like rib cages. And I'm like, and that just sent me. So I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. So I'm so on edge right now that I drive further down.
Right.
And I'm flying down this straight road, and I go over a hill, and I see 2 pickup trucks parked, blocking the road. So I I whip out of there so fast. And like since then, I've been back there so many times. It's one of the most awesome and peaceful places. The people are like, when you do run into people, they're very nice.
Right.
But it was just like, I was in such a weird zone in my head that they probably were sitting there looking at my car flying over the hill and then screeching on the brakes and whipping out of it. They're probably like, what the hell is that guy doing, you know? But since then, that has been like my ritual where I go back there, put on weird music, just drive through like the woods and kind of just try to see which songs are the ones that evoke that like crazy paranoia.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, let's try some stuff like that, you know?
That's
because you're going back
like
there,
that, yeah.
You're listening to Chainsmokers. You're not going to be scared. You're going to be like, hey, like, pass me a beer. Like, this is great. But you listen to some of that techno and you're like, I'm going to get murdered and it's going to be here and tonight.
Yeah, man. Well, I wonder if any of that goes back to your film background a little too, because, you know, when you think about like setting the whole scene and the soundtracks to some of the films we all love or some of the most, you know, like moving or affecting films, there's always music tied to it, right? But you need kind of that complete picture to really get that full feeling, you know?
Yeah, and it definitely does. You know, it's not like I was a huge like movie buff or like shooting any movies, but that I just love that feeling of that suspense and that tension where you know you're fine. You know, like you can literally talk yourself off the ledge and be like, listen, like I'm in the woods, like nothing bad's going to happen. I'm just freaking out a little. But that's kind of the same feeling I get when I'm watching a scary movie. You know, you're like, I know it's going to be scary. I know I'm going to be fine. And you just kind of embrace it and go along for the ride. And that's really the stuff that I enjoy listening to. And then once I was put out into the woods, not put out into the woods. Once I made it sound so much worse. Once I went out there and I like put on that music, I was able to like contextualize like what it was that I was looking for. And, you know, that added like another layer to what I was into, what comes across in my brand. I was even just looking, we shot, let me see if I have it. We went to this ranch in Houston that my manager's family owns, and we were just shooting on this.
Oh yeah, the old school camcorder.
So we're out in the middle of Texas playing real creepy music, and at night shooting this, just getting like drunk. And man, just watching through the footage, I was like, yes, this is like exactly it. Like this is exactly it. You know?
That's great, man.
And
again, that just goes back to, you're making me think of, you know, your early days when you were saying you were just sort of fucking around with your friends and having fun without a lot of expectations on it. Because I think that's getting back to that, man. I talk about that on the show all the time. Like, I don't think there's anything better an artist can do than try to get in touch with those early feelings.
Oh yeah. And it's so true. Cause, you know, I always tell people, like, I think you could make a point. You could argue that in some sense, the music that you're making in your first to second year is like some of the most pure music you'll ever make. Cause you're not like, well, I should low cut this sound because, you know, I should obviously low cut it. You know, you're not like, I should put OTT on it because I should. You're just like, you have no boundaries or limitations. You don't know what's cool, what's not. You're just kind of doing you.
Yep.
And not worrying about that stuff. And I just try to always come up with ways to get back to that. So yeah, like going to the ranch and making music with Revel, who is the most fun music. He's the most fun to make music with.
Is that right?
When we make music together, it's like there is nothing that is not good enough, or just we're just like, so he's on FL, I'm on Ableton. One of us has a project open, other person's just throwing shit into a Dropbox, and we're just drinking, having a good time, and we're just throwing everything into this project. And anything we do, we rarely like go back or tweak. We're just like, yeah, good. Okay, go. Moving on. Yep. Okay, go. It's like, it almost looks like we don't give a shit at all. But
right.
That is just, we know that's the best workflow, and we'll write like 4 songs in a day. And you listen to him, and once you've had some time away from it, you're like, this is actually sick.
Yeah.
You know, it is rough and raw, but it's sick at the same time.
Yeah, man. Well, and he too, I mean, I know he's doing like a whole video game that he's soundtracking right now.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, he seems like a fairly inspired guy to be around.
Yeah, he is without a doubt one of the most pivotal people in my journey as HELLBOUND. I had reached out to him after I stopped the Tassion project and before I started the HELLBOUND project, I probably had like a 2-month span of I wasn't making music. I wasn't doing anything music related. I had just taken a full-blown hiatus. And I remember listening to some of Revel's early stuff. Right around the same time, I was really getting inspired with like rave stuff. And he had released on this Philly label called Super Dead that one of my friends ran. And I was like, yo, who is this guy? Like, can you put me in touch with him? And I'm looking at, his profile picture. I'm like, this guy's like cool as hell. Like, there's no way he's just going to like be like, yeah, sure, dude, I'll show you everything. Right. And you can't get the guy to shut up. Like, he is just, you give him like a little drink and oh my God, you'll ask him anything. Like he'll tell you everything. He's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I had like a long, I don't know him well, but we had a long convo in the DMs once that, yeah, I was like, man, nobody spends this much time just like chatting in the DMs.
Yeah, he's brilliant. And just he really was the one that sort of got the idea across that like any knowledge about this stuff is just free and everybody should have it. Because he was saying, the thing that I said, it's like everybody's got the same tools. Everybody's got the same gear. Like everybody's sampling Amen breaks from this, It's none of it is yours. Like you don't own any of that information. None of that belongs to you. And that's something that I really like about this style of music that is not really the same for some of the more like futuristic and inventive genres. So that was something I really appreciated about him was he just shares everything with anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. There's no like, oh, like you're not like popping enough. Like I'm not like, I don't need to tell you. He'll talk your ear off. It doesn't matter who it is.
That's great, man.
Yeah, he's the best.
That's really good. Well, I mean, that makes me think about, you mentioned earlier that you were kind of working on a sequencer for Ableton workflow kind of stuff. Is that, between that and your background working for Cymatics and all that, is that part of the fun for you as well? Like building the tools of it or sharing those tools? So
with the sequencer thing, I am not nearly smart or talented enough to actually go into Max for Live and code it. But luckily, my friend Sabroy is like the smartest person I've ever met. And so talented. He made a Max for Live plugin called Console that is supposed to like emulate some old console stuff, as well as he added some few things. And like the guys from Noisia, like Skrillex, all use it. Like,
oh, wow.
He is unbelievable. So Revel is really good friends with Adam, who's Sabroy. I got in touch with him and his manager, Shrey, who we're all just really good friends with. And I had this workflow idea because I had come from, just working everything in the box. Then I go to hardware and I start learning about sequencers and how you can just route any signal to anything, and like this really modular workflow that I like loved. And I'm like, wow, this is like perfect for creating like really random generative like results. And that was one of my favorite things about not only the hardware, but techno was lay down a fat kick, let the sequencer run, and you're like, I guess that's the song. Like,
right. It was like you actually collabing with the machine itself, right?
Yeah, you're just, the way I looked at it was when I was working with hardware and like when I do a lot of the generative stuff that I do on Ableton is, I don't know. I feel like I'm just like setting something up and then having it generate stuff. And then I'm just being like, okay, like that's cool. Like I'll just put that there. Like I don't even feel like I'm making it.
Right.
I feel like I'm like quality control.
Yeah, you're like curating it almost.
Yeah, I'm like curating it. So like I'll record a big long take and then I'm like, I haven't touched anything. There's takes that I step away from my computer for an hour.
Yeah.
Because I just have it so random to where things are constantly changing. And then I'll come back and I'll listen to it and I'll be like, that's cool. Like I'll do that. And then, so
yeah, it's
great, like a fun
man.
way to do it.
No, that's a super fun way to do it. Cause I think that's just as open as you sitting down and writing a complex melody yourself, but it's just using a different part of your brain or thinking about the process in a different way. I don't know, that stuff like that really excites me. I'm kind of curious. This is sort of a side thing, but did you ever meet Garrett I.O. before he died? Man, because
I did not.
Before you and I were coming to talk, I was like trying to think of who else in the States like was even working kind of on anything similar to what you're doing right now. And he was the first person I thought of.
It's crazy because I wasn't even listening to like I.O. really when I started the HELLBOUND project, because the inspiration that I got for the HELLBOUND project just stemmed directly from like 90s like rave stuff, and the idea, the workflow. It wasn't so much like this new wave of techno. And then I started listening to I.O. and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like this is like the perfect, he's like the poster child for techno in America. The music is perfectly digestible yet raw enough.
Yeah.
It's like right in the pocket. It's so well done, and then you look at him, he's like tall and beautiful. And I'm like, God, like the guy's got it all, I'm like, this is going to work. So, just to like see his trajectory and where it was going. I just was like, I felt like it was his project was still in this mode. And then it just was, I truly believed that, where I was like, he had such a fast ascent. And I was like, this is nothing compared to what's about to happen.
Oh, he was going to be huge. Yeah.
Because I really felt like, and I feel like it still hasn't happened, but I feel like techno in the States is still not even close to being what it will be and what it would have been had I.O. still been around. Because you see, like Charlotte DeWitt, Amelie Lenz coming over to America, and it's like, once they start coming here more, and you have guys like I.O. like really just at the top. I feel like it would have been great, and I never knew him personally, but it obviously fucking sucked like hearing that, because I was like, shit, like I was really excited for like what it was gonna become, and I just was like, wow. I was so sure that it was gonna happen, that the idea that or like the reality that it was never gonna happen, I was like, oh, it was crazy.
It's a punch in the gut, man. I think you guys would have had a lot to connect over too, because he had sort of a similar trajectory. He had like a bass music project before he was I.O. And I think similar to you, kind of got disenchanted with it and the EDM scene in general, and made that switch. And
I think he was a few years older than me too. So it really, like, you could look at the parallels, and like, obviously I haven't had the success that he's had, but
yeah, sure, it's different paths, but there's definitely parallels to draw. I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier today when I was thinking about talking to you, is that techno in America, I mean, there's so many. I think the underground techno scene is really strong in a lot of places in America. For sure. But then there's kind of this missing link, this missing connection to the bigger festival stages or the EDM community or whatever you want to call it. And, somebody like Garrett, like I.O., he was right in the middle of all of that. He was kind of that
perfect
connection. And I feel like a lot of the music you're making could be that as well. I mean, is there anybody else you're aware of? Anybody else in the US that's doing really cool shit right now?
There's so many, and a lot of people that we're signing to like NULLSECT, a lot of really cool artists kind of coming out of the woodwork, like being like a dubstep artist being like, yo, I got a techno EP, like, let's go. And I'm like, yo, let's go. But there's me, there's Revel, who has really been making some insane techno, like real, he's been making stuff all different genres because he's just like crazy like that, but been making a lot of great techno. There's an artist out of Toronto, Barbosa, who is so dope. And he is just one of the most knowledgeable and like connected people that I've met through this like journey. He's just like so on point with it. Like he just has his, his finger on the pulse, and he has a label called Heist Mode, which is really sick. They put out such good music. It's incredible.
I got
another artist named Declan James from Dallas, who so young and so talented. It's unbelievable. I just put out a song with him and this other artist that I'm about to bring up, Drac. We just put out a song together. That's like, big warehousey, melodic, kind of I Hate Models-ish.
Right.
Drac, another artist who's so dope, makes amazing techno. I stumbled upon his music a few years ago. There's this guy from Louisiana named Ragdoll TK, who's one of my favorite artists.
That's a great name.
We're putting out some of his music on NULLSECT, which is cool. I don't want to mention the other artists who have like kind of made techno stuff but aren't like techno artists, because like I don't really, I don't want to like talk before it's all said and done. But
sure.
There's a few artists that are pretty notable that I'm like excited to have their music coming out.
That's dope, man. Well, yeah, one artist who I know makes techno on the side and is pretty open about it is Buku, Rob.
Yeah,
and
I also need to mention Sarah Landry because she's the absolute queen of it all. It's funny because I always won't think of her because I'm like trying to think of like the underground kids who are like, really climbing, but she's like touring Colombia and like Europe, but she lives I think she's from Austin, and she is just, she's the best,
Yeah, it's cool, man. And there's so many more. Like I said, I know Buku makes techno on the side and he's loved that for years.
Yeah.
Like I was touring with him 5-6 years ago and he was talking about making techno. And I think you're right. It's one of those things that people kind of mature into it at a certain point. And so like you were saying earlier, where someone could go to an IO set and get turned on to it, to me, that's the link. Because I think older techno heads, there's like an attitude about EDM basically, where they don't want anything to do with it. They don't see the connection, which I get. But then to me, it's like, but there's this big audience that you could have that I think would really be into it if there's just a way to make that link.
Yeah, I'm really lucky because all the guys that I'm doing NULLSECT with, we're all very much on the same page of like what inspires us. And you're right. Like when you're looking for that link, like what is going to be the aspect of this that has new people coming in? Because a lot of people are like hesitant to try new things, like truly open up to new things. People will sit there and say like, oh, like I'll try anything. But a lot of people are really comfortable in their little zone, and going into new things with an open mind is something that not everybody's about. The thing that I really love about the vision we have for NULLSECT and a lot of this, like this hard techno scene, is I think that me personally, and maybe this is just like my extreme interest, but I've just kind of gotten really bored of like just basic, like run of the mill, like live shows. And when I envision a NULLSECT show, and especially like the early versions of NULLSECT events, it is like trying to capture what those raves must have been like in the early 90s, where they were illegal, where you had to call a number, get a location, get dropped off at the location, then driven to another one. Like I was not there for that. I was a kid, you know what I'm saying? But that inspires me. And so being able to throw events in weird locations and do things like that, nowadays you just go on your phone, go to Ticketmaster or whatever, like buy the ticket, Uber to the event. And I think there's something really cool to where we could sort of bring back this old vibe to it. So you really think you're like in the shit, you know?
Yeah, man. Well, and it makes you work for it. I was just talking to somebody the other day about, the older rave scene. So much of it, you had to work really hard to figure out where it was, to figure out, how you got in, all of that. And now, like you just said, it's all a click away. And there's nothing, I mean, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think
no, nothing at all.
The old school mentality, really, it was self-selecting. The people who were there really wanted to be there.
Yeah. And I think that now there obviously wouldn't be the same level of like, back then it was like actually illegal. Like you actually had to do those things to like not get arrested. Nowadays, it would just be, I compare it to an escape room.
Right.
Like, you can get out of the room, but it's the fun little challenge. Like, yeah, let's see if we can get out. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I love
and
that,
I think,
man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of gives it, to me, that's what I would imagine like really enjoying is like going through an experience like that. I played a show with Def, who's down in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And the show I played, I mean, I got driven to this trail in the woods and I have to walk 20 minutes back to this abandoned like railroad tunnel or something.
Yeah.
And there's CDJ set up and like 50 people. And I'm like, this is fucking awesome. Yeah. Like, I want to do this, like inject that into my veins. Like, I want more of that.
So dope.
Man.
Yeah.
They're doing it so well. And they have a little abandoned like boiler room that they throw shows in. They have it all on YouTube as well. They stream all their stuff.
I've seen some of the videos from their shows. I talked to X and G, who played one of those too. And
yeah, I played with them.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Or so the weekend they played the boiler. The next day, the day before, we did like a pre-party where they played their project 2 Point, I believe it's called.
Yeah.
Which is like really cool, like dance, like dancey, like,
yeah, kind of.
I'm not going to say it's house or techno
stuff, but yeah,
it's somewhere in there. It's insane, obviously. But yeah, and I just think that's so cool how it's like, okay, like how to get to the show. Like you need instructions. Like it's not just an address,
right?
It's like go down the path next to the light and then make a left when you see the 3 tree. And it's like, that's so sick.
It's so great, man. And it's a way to build culture too. Like that's, I always worry when I'm talking about like wanting, to bring underground stuff into the mainstream, that people will think that it's kind of like stripping the culture away and commercializing it. But I still, maybe I'm wrong, but I've always thought there are ways to do it so that you can preserve the roots of it and the culture behind it. And I think little things like that, that's just one example, but little things like that where people have to work a little bit to get to the party, even that, it's like the people, who's going to do that? The people who really want to be there and really care about it.
And I could see a scenario in which, let's say you have 2 friends, like you're in a rave family, a big friend group, and 2 friends go to an event like that where you have to get, you Uber to like an abandoned location. And then you see a guy and he walks you through that. And it's like that experience. I could see people having like thinking that was really cool and then going back and be like, yo, we got to do this. Like, yeah, that was so sick. Like I've never heard music like that. It was such a vibe, like getting there. I feel like shows nowadays are like, and maybe it's just because I've been in the industry for so long. And like, I still need to think about the 18-year-olds that are just getting into this for the first time, how special that is to them because it is so new. But I just feel like it's literally been the exact same, but there's just way more festivals.
Yeah, I agree.
Since I started, and I'm like, the live setting of some of these European like hard techno shows that I see just through Instagram because I'm not there, I'm like, that is insane. Like that is insane. I don't see anything like that here,
Yeah, no, it's true, man. It's so commercialized here at a certain point that. Yeah, I think you're not alone in that, man. I think any of our peers you can talk to, even the people who are just destroying it right now, we all get kind of bored with it from time to time because it really is just very very one note, you know?
Yeah.
And which again is nothing wrong with it. I'm really glad that there are so many great people who are successful right now and really crushing right now. But I think, you gotta get in touch with why it's exciting to you and not just trying to get a piece of the pie, you know?
Yeah. And I don't hate it because it's like, God, it's like how many careers is like, has this industry been able to like provide for people? Like the commercialization of that and where it's at now compared to where it was at like 15 years ago.
Right.
Is just night and day. So it's not that I hate it and I don't want it, but I'm just like, I feel like we could do something additionally that could be really cool as well.
Progressive, man. That's what it's all about. I mean, even seeing you, I don't know if this is going to happen or if this is shelved or whatever, but like, say you did go on tour with Keizo or something like that. I think that would be fantastic to see you doing what you do in front of his crowd. Like, I don't know, even just more mixed bills like that. I think
that's the thing I really like. When I see a mixed bill, I'm like excited because I'm like, oh, I get to experience like a multitude of different things. You know, it's another reason why I really enjoy like Porter's festivals because I'm like, there's everything. Like I get to listen to stuff that I would never hear.
Yeah,
you know, because the people that he picks because that is like what he wants to showcase.
You trust his curation, right? I mean, where are you at as far as, you know, your connections to everybody? Because you've worked with people like Keizo, you put out records with, you know, Space Yacht and Sable Valley and a bunch of people. You've got NULLSECT as kind of your home base. Like looking out this year or into the future, like what are you planning for HELLBOUND? Or like, what are some of your goals for it?
So right now, I've pretty much put all my eggs into the NULLSECT basket. And that doesn't mean that I won't release with other people, but I just think that for my vision to come true in the way I want it to come true, NULLSECT is the only way there. It's very rare that a label truly that a label's vision and your vision just truly aligns permanently forever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost impossible. That's why we've all kind of came to that decision and just we're like, okay, let's put all our eggs in a NULLSECT. We have an incredibly talented creative director that does all of the art.
Sure.
You know, me and Revel are the artists and the producers and like the A&Rs. And then my manager, Anthony, is like just the chief who sits at the top, who like just makes sure everything is going accordingly. We have another guy working on a website, a former producer named Brooms, who's like really talented. And we're just going to put out music and actually try to get into curating some live events with different promoters around the country that we've been talking to and try to throw those shows that we've been talking about where it's whether or not it's actually going to be illegal. Like I want it to give you that vibe where it's like, there's no way this is approved, you know?
Yeah. Or at least that, you know, that feeling of like, this is new. Like, I don't know what this is, right?
Yeah. Where you're like, how did I get in the woods and why is there a rave here? But I'm here and this is cool, you know?
I love
That's
that.
kind of like what we want to do because that really fits the energy of the music that we make and the music that we're going to be releasing. And I think right now we have scheduled weekly releases up until like at least August.
Oh, that's
so
great.
And all of these guys are like underground techno artists that are just really dope. So we're super proud of that. And then I think just getting into doing some live events, that'll really be the thing that hopefully people will come and be like, I get it fully. And there's nothing else like this here, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my goal 100%. And I think that from doing that, HELLBOUND will have more success.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I want to build. I want to build NULLSECT up and like just, you know, ride with that and make something kind of bigger than just like my project trying to like fit in where it can in the current, you know, layout of the dance music industry.
I love that, man, because that's at the end of the day, that's the only ways. You got to build it yourself. And I think getting into, taking on, that's a ton of work to shoulder, like actually throwing a bunch of events and all that. But at the end of the day, if you have a vision for it, you're absolutely right that nobody else is going to see that vision until you show it to them,
Yeah. It's a ton of work, but it literally, like, we were just like, there's no other way. Like, we've exhausted all options. There's no other way. Like,
yeah.
It's got to be this.
That makes sense.
But I'm super happy with it because I'm, trying to make music that speaks to you. And then you get to the point where you send it to your manager and you're like, what labels want this? And he's like, newsflash, buddy. None of them want it because this is insane. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm listening to,
Yep.
That's a really frustrating part that makes you like, there's tons of times where I'm like, I sit down to write a song. I'm like, why am I even writing a song? Like, I have so many, none of them are going to get picked up. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
But now with NULLSECT, it kind of offers this entirely new creative outlet to where I can feel better about being like, I can make whatever the hell I want because it's going to fit this narrative and fit this message that we're trying to send.
Yeah.
And it's not so much like all on me. It's like me and Revel and all the artists and people involved, like seeing them do it and then them getting hyped on what I'm making and me getting hyped on what they're making. It makes the whole process way more fun than just like pumping out EDM songs, shipping it off to label, and then just like, I don't know.
Yeah. I
making a
love
TikTok or something. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Just playing the game, man. I like that.
Yeah.
At a certain point, you kind of have, we all have to play the game a little, but at a certain point, it's like, nah, man, like you gotta write the rules for your own.
Yeah. And that was like really like when I decided to like do this again, that's when I really was like, all right, I'm either not going to do it or I'm going to do it my way and my way only. Obviously, there's concessions that you make that are like not, brand altering or, right. But I'm not going to just do some whack stuff that doesn't speak to me. And I was like, yeah, I'm either going to like not do it or I'm going to do it my way. And if I fail my way, then so be it. But there's no way I'm going to do it somebody else's way. Because if I fail that way, I'm going to be pissed. Like, I'm going to be pissed off.
Yeah, there you go, man. And that's the thing. It's whether succeed or failure, it's not really the point, right? It's just that you're doing it the way you want to do it. Like I think about that all the time because so many people, and I've been guilty of this too, you make compromises along the way to kind of try to get to whatever that next step is. But then at the end of the day, you get there and it's not even very fulfilling because you kind of lost all the shit that you were excited about.
Exactly. And that's even if you get there.
Right.
You know how many, most of the times you don't get there.
True. Absolutely.
Most of the times you're like, conceding like huge to try to like fit what you think is going to work for somebody else. And then it doesn't work. And then you're like, what am I doing? You know what I'm saying? It's like,
what has happened to my life? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's like how I felt when I like ended the Tassiano project. I was like, it's like, I hate this. Why am I, and it's not working. So like, screw it. I'm done,
Yeah. Man, this is kind of a topic shift, but were you raised in Jersey? Like, is that where you grew up around?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, was there any local stuff in Jersey that reached you when you were a kid?
I mean, I grew up in Jersey, but it was like 30 minutes from Philadelphia. So that's why a lot of the times when I explain it to people, I'll be like, it's so funny. The term right outside of, there's like a term that I always see. It's like the kid from Jersey who's right outside of Philly. Like, that's the term. But like, that's honestly the best way to describe it because it basically is Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It would be like if LA, obviously LA is way bigger, but like if LA bordered on another state by like literally a half a mile and you lived like 2 miles into that state, you wouldn't be like, whoa, that state's crazy. It's like, no, it's basically LA,
Yeah. It's almost like a suburb of Philly or something.
It is a suburb of Philly.
Yeah.
It is a suburb of Philly. So, growing up there, like I grew up in a really nice town. I had a bunch of great friends. It wasn't like anything specific that like led me to one thing or another. I guess like definitely having supportive parents is huge, you know, because there's anything I wanted to try, they'd be like, yeah, just go for it. Like, just do it, you know?
That's great.
And so that's huge. And then also like my best friend growing up, Tie-Dye Kai, you know, we lived next door to each other from the time we were 5. And we were in bands together, skateboard together, do everything together. He was the one that like got me onto Logic Pro. You know, we both live in Philly. I was with him today. So literally like 23 years later, like we're still like making music and skateboarding around the city like we were when we were 10.
That's great, man. That's the best. That's the best.
Yeah.
Thing. Yeah.
So probably honestly, that was like the people that I grew up with. Another one, Digital Ethos. I actually met him through ice hockey when I was like 13. None of us were making music, and me, Kyle, and Digital Ethos are hanging out, just doing high school things. And then we all start making music, and now we all have like careers in it and like still hang out every day. So,
hey man, that's a beautiful thing. There's something to be said for that. Cause I feel like I don't know, maybe there's a reach, but like you staying true to your roots of, you know, your own life and the friends, the day one friends and all that. I feel like there's some parallels to then also like going back to the roots of the music you're making and kind of instead of like trying to make a new life for yourself, or instead of trying to, you know, make new musical ideas. It's like, no, like the ones we had are good. Let's have fun with those.
Yeah. And as far as like, you know, like I never ever entertained the idea of moving to like LA or a different city because like, you know, I love being around my family. I love Philly. I love being around my friends. And like, I'll never like sacrifice like my personal life happiness for some like, you know, to move to LA. You know, like obviously moving to LA can be so beneficial with the connects that you make and whatnot. But I work on music every day, all day, every day. But I mean, at the end of the day, the most important thing in my life is like friends and family. I never really got that same feeling of home when I was in LA. Also because I'm probably being dragged around the worst parts of LA, like Hollywood and...
Right, of course.
So one thing I'm very like sure of myself with like almost everything. So like if I'm like, yeah, I want to be here, like I'm going to be here and I'll like make it work, you know?
Yeah.
So same with the music. Like I don't really like, I won't really do things on like anybody else's terms because like I feel like I should.
I love that,
you know?
Man. And I think it almost makes me think about when you were talking about working with Revel in the studio too, where it's just sort of commit to something and move on and keep it moving.
Yeah.
And I think that's as good a rule for production as it is for life, I think.
Yeah. He's definitely taught me that, and maybe like even brought it out of me more. Guy's a rock star. He plays by his own rules. Like, it's awesome to see. He doesn't give a shit about what anybody else thinks he should do, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of pressure. It's like, hey, you should start a TikTok. You should maybe remix that new Doja Cat song. Like, dude, have you seen how big Tech House is? Maybe you should try doing some Tech House stuff. Right. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are all like real things that like are definite pressures to where you're like, you know, it's very easy to like feel like you should do that in order to succeed. But, you know, it's good. I have the people around me that I do because like, you know, I'm able to be like, nah, we're going to fucking do this. And they're like, yeah, fuck that. We're going to do it. Yeah. You know,
it's the best, man. I think, having that support system it's hard to do it without that. It's hard to sort of stand on your own 2 feet without that support system.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, shit, we've been talking for a while, man. Is there anything we haven't talked about that's on your mind? Anything you want to get out there? Anything you want to let people know before we wrap it up?
The main thing I'm working on is NULLSECT, and I'm going to be releasing a ton of music through NULLSECT as well as other people's music. I guess just stay tuned. Like that's really it. Like we're just kind of going to be going rapid fire this year. So
I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see where you guys go with it. It's always, I'm sure it's nerve-wracking and a ton of work, but I love those moments where it's like you have all these ideas, but they haven't happened yet. That potential, I feel like that's a real exciting place to be.
It is. And it's great because we're like actually past that point to where for a year we were like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And we're going to do, and now we've like signed enough music for August, have it scheduled. And now we're like, okay, like it's actually happening. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, man, jumping in. I love it.
Yeah. So
well, that's great, man. Well, let me ask you the final question then. It's the same question I ask at the end of each episode here. Just looking for a memory from your life, a moment, could be from any time, when in that moment, music really deeply impacted you, really had like just a crazy effect on you in that moment. And that's meant to be super broad. There's no wrong answer.
So there's actually a defining moment where it was the day I absolutely decided that I was going to do music for the rest of my life. I took LSD and went down to DC and walked around. I was with my buddy. We walked around all the Smithsonians and, you're like, I'm not advising anybody to do any of this,
but it was pretty great.
This is education. This is for educational purposes only. Walked around all the Smithsonians, had a really cool day. And it just, to me, like it felt like I was, experiencing life through like, just, I don't know, just a different perspective. And you see things more clearly sometimes from a different perspective. It's hard to like get that.
Yeah.
It's impossible. Like you're only kind of, it's really hard to get that. So that night we went to, this lineup is going to throw you for a loop. It was Downlink, Candyland, OK, and Kill Paris.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I know it. So I know that era well. Yeah.
you already know what year it is. So it wasn't like anything from the music was like took me, but that was the first time where I was like, I can do this. I think I can do this,
Yeah.
So at that point it was like, I'd already quit hockey because I just like I wasn't putting in the work. I wasn't good anymore because I didn't put in the work. That was a great life lesson for real.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Taught me that the hard way. So I quit hockey. I was so fed up with the film stuff. And at that moment, I was like, I can do this and I'm going to do it. And literally from that day, there hasn't been and that was like 8 or 9. Geez, that was 9 years. Was maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, man.
Scary. Since then, there hasn't been a day in my life where I thought I was going to do anything else. So
it's beautiful, man. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And what's nice about that is it's not like there haven't been hard days or days where you fell down about it or whatever, but it's, making a commitment and sticking to it. Like I talk about that on the show all the time. Like success is just not quitting. That's all success is.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you fail the second you give up,
Yep.
So I don't know that. And it's like making a decision to do that is kind of like scary in the moment because it's not like I knew anything,
Yeah.
I just was like, I think I can do this. And that was what I was like super into OK at the time, like all that early trap stuff. And I'm like, I feel like I could like, this is sick. I feel like I could do this. That was probably the biggest memory where like that day was just crazy.
Yeah. That's what set it off, man. The Museum of Natural History mixed with trap music.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Oh God.
That's great, man. Well, shit, dude, I'm glad we finally connected to do this.
Yeah, man, me too.
Thank you for taking the time.
Dude, thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was great, man. All right, dude, I'll let you go. Great talking to you.
All right, sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
Peace, man. Take care.
Later.